Hey fellow traveler, I told you I'd talk more about Crimson. Today's that day. So strap in and strap on. It's time to go for a wild ride with your girl Erica B. Today on Tales of Erotasy. Welcome to Tales of Erotasy, a place for lust, lore, and legend. This is your host, Erica B. Welcome to episode 4 of Erotasy. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. Today we're going to do something a little differently. Instead of the normal setup of, tools of your trade and a review, and then a short story, I'm going to talk about Crimson. As I mentioned before, you're going to hear a lot about Crimson, but there is a particular reason why I'm focusing on it today. By the time this releases, I will have started dropping the main story, the big deal, the thing I've been working on for about a decade. And I'm really excited about it. And that is The Last Son of Danu. It is the very first story in the Crimson world. I know it's kind of crazy that most of the other stories I've already dropped are part of this world, but not in the main story. Well, it is in the main story, but it's kind of like ancillary stories revolving around the same incident. I really don't know what made me decide to do it that way, but I thought it would be kind of interesting. People who would buy the short stories would get little pieces and be able to put it together. And then the next two stories, the main stories, The Last Son of Danu and the demon beneath her skin, are the main stories. Though that's just the beginning. I do have a whole lot more planned out. Altogether, I think I tallied 6 stories in the main series. And Last Son of Danu is the first one. Okay, so if you really want to know more about how Crimson came to be, you want to listen to the first podcast I did. That tells about how I wound up getting involved in this story and how it's all thanks to my friend Tommy and the world he built for his story series that I'm hoping someday he decides to release, but I know he's really busy, so I don't think he has a lot of time to write right now. But Tommy's story really drew me in, and while I did start off by playing in his world, I did eventually make it my own in a separate series with my characters from the game we played that was based on his world. So that's the long and the short of it. But there is more detail in the first podcast if you're interested. Now, I'm totally flying off the cuff here in regards to talking about this series. I feel like I could probably talk about it all day, as it is my baby. And like I said, I've been working on it for 10 years, maybe even more than 10 years now that I'm thinking about it. And right now, I just want to give you some of the details, like the inside scoop of the story, so that listeners of Erotasy can have a head start as it's getting dropped. Okay, so let's go. Do I dare get dramatic about it? No. I would have had to written that out. No. I'm just going to be casual. So what is my world of Crimson? It's actually an alternative Earth. The biggest change between our real world and my world is that when the meteor that hit the Earth 65 million years ago and killed off all the dinosaurs, it had a greater effect on the planet than just killing off the dinosaurs. It actually punched a hole into the realities around ours or near ours. Because in my head, the multiverse is like really, really connected, and there's some universes that are a bit closer to yours than others. And the 2 closest ones were Danu, which would be the realm of the Fae, and the Abyss or Hell, which is the world of demons. And I came up with some really confusing stuff, even for my own self, when it comes to how it all works. But Basically, after the Earth got hit by the asteroid, the inside of the Earth, like the mana of the Earth, or the magic that is held within the Earth, kind of got pushed to the surface and also blasted a hole into these other two universes, linking all three. So while Earth is kind of reeling from this cataclysm, the other two realms, the Abyss and Danu, they evolved on their own, and out of all three of them, the first intelligent species sprung up in the realm of the Fae, which were the Fae. And the demon realm was more animalistic creatures with lower intelligence, but they were getting there. Man, that sounds like a whole asshole right there. Oh, they were lower intelligence. It just sounds rude, but it's true. Oh no, I forgot to put my phone on mute, but I'm sorry, just ignore that sound that popped up. It has nothing to do with the wizard behind the mic. Anyway, so the way I see it in my head, and this may sound totally crazy, is like, it's not like a perfect straight line between the three realms. It's kind of like they're all wrapped around each other. So there is an entrance to the Abyss from the Fae realm that's a little bit, I haven't figured out exactly why it is, but it is a little bit bigger than the hole, or more accessible than the hole between Earth realm and the other two. Not that the others have a difficult time moving through them, but that's where they are. And since it was a little easier for the Fae and demon realms to interact, and the Fae were the more intelligent beings and kind of saw the demon as bestial, they started enslaving the demon. And that is a long time coming. It's like a long evolution. And while some of the demon are connected to the Fae realm because they brought over as slave labor, basically, or like manual labor, I guess, they gained their own intelligence. And as they got smarter, they had the Hell Kings appear, which would be like our Lucifer and Mammon, Asmodeus, and stuff like that. They all gained their intelligence while they were slaves in the Fae realm, and eventually went back home and took over their own realm. And towards the end, before the more intelligent, powerful demons popped up, humans also were enslaved. Like, not just humans as we are, but also like the Neanderthals. They all got shipped to different realms to be labor as well. They were a little more dexterous than the demons, so it made sense for the Fae to enslave everyone. Man, the Fae are really coming off as assholes, aren't they? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So everything was okay. I mean, there was a war between the demon and the Fae. I keep saying demon because it was demon originally, but the demon and the Fae, and they, basically were bitter enemies for a very long time. And eventually, as things do, something happened. None of the characters really know exactly why this happened, but the pathways to the realms closed up. Now, the Fae kind of knew it was coming a while back, so a bunch of the older Fae decided to just go back into their realm and close it off themselves. The demons stuck around for a little bit longer, but as they got wind that something was terribly wrong, they also went back into the Abyss and just started exodus into the Abyss. And then some of the Fae that were left on Earth, who were younger Fae, they were like, there's nothing wrong. We're not leaving. This is our home. So they stayed on Earth. Unfortunately, that wound up being a bad call. But I will tell you the secret. The reason why the realm was closed is because of the Earth. Her essence was being sucked dry by all these beings. She also created gods like the gods we know of, as like protectors of the realm, but it wasn't enough. So since so much energy was being drained from Mother Earth, she was like, nope, we're not having this with these other realms sucking on my teat. So that shit got shut down. It was like, nope, no, none of this. And after that portal closed, there is the Fae that were still there, but they just disappeared. No one knew what happened to them. They just vanished. There's echoes of the Fae. So when people who are human, like in modern times, see fairies, they're really seeing echoes of the old Fae that used to be. And at the point where the story opens, there is only one Fae left, and that is Kay. And he's one of the main characters of the story, him and Dena. So the final countdown, basically, of the time frame of the realm's closing was around the beginning, like around 2,000 years ago, or a little bit more. So like around the time of Jesus, but that's not exactly involved. I'm thinking in my story, Jesus is one of the gods that had powers from Earth to protect the realm. And, you know, after the realms close, a majority of the gods either lost their powers or lost some of their immunity and died. There are a few floating around. It's not many. There are also a few demon that are still left on Earth. Not enough for Mother Earth to banish because she wouldn't have noticed those demon. So they're around at the time in the story too. It's just like a handful. And then everything else is, you know, vampires, shapeshifters, witches, and things like that. So the unique thing I feel that I made unique for Crimson is how vampires and shapeshifters work. Actually, in the story, they're called skinwalkers instead of shapeshifters because they are humans way back who were enslaved by the Fae when that started letting up a bit, and the Fae started realizing, oh, well, the humans are a little bit more like us than we give them credit for. They taught some of the more magically endowed ones on how to shapeshift into animals. And that's how the skinwalkers got their powers. So their magic is Fae-based, basically. And the vampires come from a disease that was spread by the Pins when demon and human were together and enslaved. And they caught the disease of vampirism. So they're kind of on the demon side. And of course, witches and creatures like that, like psychics and things like that, are human, and their power is totally earth-based, and it came from Mother Earth. So while a lot of the gods lost some of their powers, some of the other beings that are around that are from Earth do have a little bit of power, just not as much as the gods used to. Boy, I hope that makes sense. I admit I'm having a lot of fun talking about this because this whole thing has been just trapped in my head for a decade or more, and it's nice to finally get it out. And hopefully someone out there is also enjoying this as much as I am. So about Crimson itself. So Crimson is a fictional fictional city. Actually, I don't even want to say city. It's more of a resort town. It's populated with maybe like 5,000 people who actually live there, and the rest is tourism. In my head, I kind of imagine it as being south of Ocean City, Maryland. Now, honestly, Ocean City, Maryland is kind of like by itself on the shore. So in my head, it's like, again, alternative Earth. So, they, not that I don't love horses. I kind of imagine Aztec Island is like, a little bit in that area of where Crimson is, and it's kind of bigger or rounder. So instead of it just being like a sharp little kind of point at the end of Ocean City, it is kind of a rounded point, or rounded point doesn't make any sense, does it? But like a rounded area instead. And that's where Crimson lies. And Crimson is like a magical pulse point. So when the asteroid hit the Earth, there are places where, like how a bump, you press a bump, it kind of bursts open. Ew, that sounds gross. But anyway, you know what it is. And like there's different places around around the world that magic kind of just like shot up into, I guess. Almost like a geyser. A volcano is kind of a better metaphor than a pimple. But yeah, it's like the magma is coming up in these little places from spreading out from where that asteroid hit. Did I say meteor earlier? No, it's asteroid, duh. Anyway, there's a bunch of these little points around the world. I usually kind of imagine them being smaller cities because while there's not many magical beings left, and like they kind of have to hide. So not hide. I'm not going to say they hide, but they kind of keep to themselves because it's a little bit easier than dealing with regular people. So yeah, these pulse points are all over the world, and Crimson happens to be one of the stronger ones. And that's why a lot of magical beings kind of congregate there. But even still, it's not that many compared to how many humans are there. I kind of imagine like it being like, if there's 5,000 people there, then maybe like less than a quarter of them are magical beings or people who know about magical beings. Most people will just think the town is kind of weird, but they don't realize that like there's vampires and there's a tribe of skinwalkers that live there near like swampland, and there's a bunch of witches in a coven, and there's supernatural police that are there, but they're in supernatural police are in other places too, and it's something that the big government knows about, but yeah, it's not a common knowledge situation when it comes to the supernatural world. Okay, and I guess the next thing I want to talk about is the main characters. The two focal characters of the story, the whole thing, are Cain Nightstone, who, as I mentioned, is the last Fae. And that's why he's the last son of Danu, because Danu is the realm of the Fae. He doesn't even know if there are any other Fae at all, because when he came back home to where they were in Ireland, they were all gone. And then there is Dena, who is just an average girl. She's very loosely based on me because originally when we played the Nightcrest game, the character was Erica and it was based on me. But she is a little bit different than I am, a little bit younger, a little bit more naive. Some of my insecurities are meshed with the character though. Like, I'm a people pleaser. I am definitely a people pleaser for sure. And also, like, I had kind of crazy home life and things like that. So there are some aspects of the character that are definitively me, in my opinion. But for the most part, the things she reacts to and how she reacts are not how I would in real life most of the time. And I don't think I would ever live on the eastern shore of Maryland because Ocean City is just kind of in the boonies, in my opinion. So I would probably never move to Eastern Shore. My most humblest of apologies if anyone who's listening lives there. I like visiting, but I wouldn't want to live there full time. Anyway, she's just a really happy person most of the time, despite all the trauma she lived through. But during the course of the story, she's starting to feel like something is taking her over and she doesn't really understand, and it's very scary for her. As for Kay, he is like maybe 2,200 years old, and he still actually is in the prime of his life. So while Dena is like around 23, physically and mentally, Kay is about 30. So the age difference isn't that weird. I mean, he is a little wiser, but he also is kind of immature in the greater scope of things. He also is very used to being alone. He kind of is like humans and like the vampires and the shapeshifters are all beneath me. Because he was a prince and he also was a fae, and as we call the fae, enslaved everyone else at one point before they let it go. And so he doesn't really want to get to know anyone. I mean, he's kind of off and on pretending to be human. Well, he pretends to be human all the time, but he kind of off and on enters society. He kind of pretends to be his dad or whatever, you know, like, the iteration before him was his father, and that was actually still him. I'm sorry, that didn't make any sense. But yeah, he's just pretending to be generational whenever he does decide to incorporate into human society. And he's been all over the world and seen a lot of stuff, but even at that, he still has the mentality of a 30-year-old person. And I know 30 is pretty mature, but it also still leaves room for, some growth in the long haul. And he meets up with Dena after a crazy set of circumstances, and they get along famously. She is a little weird. He's a little weird. They actually kind of have a very similar sense of humor, which he kind of finds surprising, as a lot of people usually don't. It doesn't bother her that he likes to be quiet sometimes or things like that. Even though he's not usually very quiet. He usually has a lot to say, but in kind of a distant way. You have to read it. And you should read it. I mean, it's free. Anyway. Yeah, so despite himself, he finds himself very attached to this young woman, which, in his head, he's like, this is really beneath me. And no, I don't have any real feelings for her. I just want her to admire me and kind of think of me as something like God, kind of. I know that's very pretentious, I guess. That's the only word I can think of right now. But that's kind of what he's thinking when it comes to his relationship with Dena. But at the same time, there are other things that are happening behind the scenes that revolve around Dena, and Kay gets caught up in it. And so ultimately, for this particular book, he really is the main focus, and the next one is going to be Dena. But at the time is split between the two, and all the books is just the main part for this one is Kay and how he got involved in this plot, basically against Dena, and he has to decide: should I go along with this plot and get the things I need, or should I save someone who I find myself caring about despite myself? And that is the big part of the whole Crimson series is, do you do things for the greater good or do you things for yourself? And giving into your more base desires versus doing what's right. Those are all big pieces of this particular set of stories. Let's see. What else can I talk about here? Let me think. So I'm going to leave it there. I feel like that's enough of an inside scoop into the story. Like I said, anyone who's listening, I just want to give you a head start over people who are just starting the series, for fun, and you deserve it. And I really hope you enjoyed the little backstory about some of the world, because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in Crimson. There's a lot of characters, a lot of situations, a lot of groups you have to juggle, but ultimately it really is a story about love and compassion and giving into the things you really want in your heart versus the things you think you need. As I mentioned, this is my baby. I have been in love with this series for so long, and I'm glad I finally decided to do something with it. I'm hoping other people out there will enjoy it as much as I do, and we'll take a look at it. For now, I'm going to release it both on Substack and on Inkitt. So you want to check both those out. My plan is to release the first 3 chapters on both on February 4th. And then every week after that on Tuesdays, I'll release the next chapter. And if I'd ever decide to turn on subscriptions on Substack, maybe I'll do like a couple days earlier for people who are subscribed to my newsletter. But also maybe I could do like a separate podcast once in a while for people to talk about Crimson directly instead of like the usual setup that I'll normally do for my podcasts. I don't know. These are just things I'm toying with and thinking about doing for the future. I really would like to see this take off. I can understand if it doesn't. There's so much stuff out there that's similar. But I really did put a lot of my heart and soul into it. So all I really need is for one other person to enjoy it, honestly. And I think that's fulfilling. And no, at the moment, I'm not going for any kind of traditional publishing because I don't think I would make any real money off this. I mean, I'm kind of impressed. I sold like 5 copies of my Tales Dripping in Crimson Volume 1 series. So I'm excited about that. But ultimately, the story is about my own passion and love for Crimson. And I don't really feel the need to have to publish it in a traditional sense to bring it to the world, I guess. I mean, there are ways to tip me if you want to without having to buy anything. So I just decided to release it this way. I'm tired of holding it in. I want the world to see it. So that's why I'm going to do it on Substack and Inkitt. And that's the story so far. Anyway, speaking of stories, I do have an excerpt. Well, no. Actually, it is a part of the Last Son of Danu that got taken out. It is a steamy scene between Dena and David, her boyfriend, before they became boyfriend and girlfriend. Now I'm sitting here debating if I want to be the one to read it or if I should let AI read it. But I guess since Dena is based off of me, I should just read it myself. Man, this is about to be really embarrassing. Ha, just kidding, it'll be great. Alright, travelers, let's get down the road. This is Once Upon a Time at the Blue Moon by yours truly, Erica B. After drifting through a few spots in Crimson, Dena and her best friend ended up at Blue Moon, a club pulsing with rumors and raw energy. She heard whispers of a werewolf pack running the place, but Dena paid them no mind. Crimson thrived on tall tales and embellished legends, and most of them were nonsense, or so she thought. The music thumped through her body as she and Juanita danced under the shifting black and blue lights. They didn't know anyone here, which made letting loose easier. Dena twirled, her dark curls bouncing with every move. Around her, the crowd pulsed in time with the beat, bodies pressed together in ways that were indecent and intoxicating. She could almost taste their energy, sweat mingled with lust, longing, and the sharp tang of secrets. A thrill shot through her, quick and hot, but it wasn't just the music or the heat of the club. It was more, something deeper and darker, clawing its way to the surface. She shivered, though her skin burned, her senses heightened to the point of overstimulation. She'd never felt more alive. Not like this, anyway. She glimpsed herself in the mirrored wall. For a moment, her dark eyes seemed to flicker violet. She blinked. The color was gone, and chalked it up to the flashing lights. But the taste of desires lingered, sweet and forbidden, leaving her stomach knotted and her pulse unsteady. She was trying to dismiss the strange sensations when she noticed him, David Morelli, standing with his friends near the bar. He wasn't like the others. The boys around him reeked of cologne and arrogance, their laughter loud and hollow. They wore their effluence like armor, their clothes too crisp, their grins too wide. David had the look too, Dark, immaculate hair, deep blue eyes, thick brows that framed a face caught somewhere between boyish charm and the promise of mischief. But there was something else, something deeper. Dena tasted it. Not physically, but in a way that made her stomach tighten and her mouth go dry. His need for connection hung on the air like a whisper. He wanted to belong, to be wanted, and it tugged at her, made her ache in ways she couldn't understand. She froze when their eyes locked. Heat rolled through her, a flush she couldn't blame on the club's temperature. A blush scorched her cheeks as she spun away. The weight of a stare sat heavily on her, and she fled to the relative anonymity of the bar. 2 beers, please, a voice called from behind her. She stiffened. Upon turning, her eyes met with his striking blue ones. I didn't mean to freak you out, David said with a warm smile, though Dena was still tense. You didn't, she lied, avoiding his gaze. She fumbled for words but found none. So, what's your name? The question threw her. His crew was still watching, their expressions ranging from amusement to mild disapproval. Was this a joke? Some frat boy dare? Great. When she didn't answer, he waved his fingers in front of her face. You got a name, right? Or should I give you one? He smirked. Cupcake. Yeah, you look like a cupcake. Ugh. Dena gagged loudly, making him laugh. Okay, so not a cupcake, he said. How about your real name, then? She sighed, though a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. It's Dena. Dena, he said, rolling the name around like a secret he planned to keep. All right, that's a great name. Don't know why you were keeping it to yourself like that, though. The bartender joined them, and David didn't hesitate to order her a drink. What'll it be? I can pay for my own, she said, stiffening. Consider it my treat, he said, brushing off her protest. David ordered a beer, then gestured for her to pick something. She went with a Long Island. When she reached for her wallet, despite him saying it was his treat, he waved her off and paid without a second thought. Thank you, she said, a puzzled look on her face. You didn't give me your name, though. It's David Morelli, David grinned at her. The grin was so perfect it could have been rehearsed. See that? First try, no games. She laughed despite herself, but the redhead who had been hanging off him earlier lingered in her peripheral vision, pouting from their table. It made Dena nervous. I believe your friends are waiting for you, she whispered, nudging him. He glanced back. His friends waved him over, but he shrugged him off. They'll survive. I see those guys all the time. I've never met a talking cupcake before. I think I'll stay here. The drinks came and they fell into a rhythm of light conversation, but beneath it, Dena felt the pull. His smile hid his wounds, and his laughter didn't quite reach his eyes. She didn't understand why she knew this, but there it was, like a flavor she couldn't untaste. It made her want to get closer, to know more. As the night wore on, their conversation grew easier. His friends left for another club, when Dena disappeared with her boyfriend, and suddenly, it was just them. David didn't just flirt, he lingered, his presence captivating in a way that made her breath hitch. But something darker lingered too, a sharp, raw energy that twisted her gut in equal parts thrill and fear. When she excused herself to the bathroom, she thought it would be the end of it. Instead, David followed. He caught her just as she turned from the mirror, pinning her gently but firmly against the tiled wall. His hand slid to her waist, his touch hot, even through her clothes. She looked into his eyes, and for a moment, they didn't seem blue anymore. They were endless, devouring. I should stop, he murmured, his voice low and thick. Tell me to stop. She shook her head. Her pulse roared in her ears as a new sensation bloomed inside her. Hungry. Desperate. She wasn't sure if it was her or him anymore. When his lips crushed hers, she gasped, and the taste of him flooded her sentences. It wasn't just physical, it was deeper, richer, like sipping on the essence of his soul. Her nails dug into his shoulders as she kissed him back, devouring every ounce of his longing. His desire fed hers, amplifying the storm building inside her. Her hands roamed, finding places that burned under her touch. When he lifted her, she wrapped her legs around his waist, her body igniting as the heat between them flared into an inferno. His arousal pressed against her, teasing, torturous, a cruel promise of what she ached for. Her needs spiraled out of control, a low growl tearing from her throat as she clawed at him, tugging his shirt free. Her fingers skated over his fevered skin, and every touch sent shocks of electricity racing through her. It wasn't just a spark. It was a vibrant, intoxicating energy, a current that left her breathless and grieving. David groaned under her touch. With a possessive touch, his hands moved lower, his fingers sinking into the warmth of her flesh, claiming her as his own. With startling ease, he carried her to the edge of the sink, his lips finding the crook of her neck. He nipped hard enough to blur the line between pleasure and pain, his teeth grazing sensitive skin until she whimpered. "Holy shit," she moaned, her voice trembling. The sound spurred him on. He attacked the opposite side of her neck, his fingers trailing down her fishnet-clad thighs and slipping beneath her skirt. She arched her against him, her hips moving in a desperate rhythm as the hardness between his legs brushed against her. A raw, eager grump escaped him, echoing her own hunger. His fingers found the waistband of her stockings, and with a few swift jerks, he tugged them down as far as her boots would allow. The cool air licked at her bare thighs before his hands replaced it, the heat of his touch searing her. Her legs parted, giving him better access. Her body begged for him, even before her words left her lips. "Touch me," she demanded, her voice thick with hunger. He obeyed, his hand slipping between her thighs until the fingers discovered the slick heat of her desire. She was drenched, the wetness undeniable, and a low curse escaped him, sent a thrill through her. "Fuck, Cupcake," he muttered, his forefingers circling her swollen clit with maddening precision. First slow, torturous strokes, then quick flicking movements that made her writhe. She gasped, her body climbing higher with every expert touch. When his fingers slid inside her, she let out a shuddering breath. The wet, obscene sounds only spurred him further, and soon a single finger joined the first, stretching her waist she never had allowed before. "Another," she purred, her voice velvet command. He obliged, his fingers pumping deep as his thumb continued its relentless assault on her aching bundle of nerves. Her body tightened, her pleasure building to an unstoppable wave. The climax hit her like a thunderclap, shattering her control and sending her careening into a storm of sensation. But as the ecstasy perked and imploded, collapsing inward, drawing everything back into her body, it wasn't just her own energy. Something intangible, something raw and vital seemed to come with it, like a thread of his spirit had been pulled into her. Is it possible, she thought, even as her heart raced and her body trembled. David cried out, his head falling back, his face a portrait of bliss before he froze, shuddering violently against her. His forehead fell into her shoulder, his breath ragged and uneven. "Shit," he groaned, his voice thick with embarrassment. For a long moment they stayed like that, her fingers gently tracing the lines of his back. He felt heavier now, his energy muted, like a fire that had burned too hot and too fast. "Sorry," he whispered, pulling back just enough to look at her. His deep blue eyes seemed dimmer, his usual spark dulled. "That's never happened before." Though apologetic, his expression showed quiet contentment. Dena's kiss-swollen lips curled into a soft, knowing smile. "Hey, don't worry about it," she murmured, her voice soothing as her hand smoothed over his damp skin. "We were rushing to something we probably shouldn't anyway." But as the words left her lips, A chill crept through her spine, heavy and unrelenting. The air felt thick, and the weight of what had just happened settled over her like a shroud. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just passion gone wrong. Whatever had ignited inside her clawed its way outward, wrapping around him and dragging him into her gravity. She could still feel a faint echo of it. Dark, powerful, insatiable, lingering in his chest. And deep down, she feared it wasn't done with her yet. Alright, so there we have it. Just a little cutout portion of The Last Son of Danu. I always kind of enjoyed that one because this is the first time I ever wrote how Dena and David met, and that's a big part of the story. The Last Son of Danu, as I mentioned, has started dropping on both Substack and Inkitt. And if you go to ericabeal.com/the-last-son, it has links to both ways to read the story. I hope you do check it out. Like I said, this is my baby. It's a thing I've been working towards for so long. And it feels really good to finally put it out in the world. I mean, I don't know how much traction it's going to get, but at this point, I kind of don't care about that so much as just saying, hey, this is my dream, and now I am living it. Because right now, it's like, for me, in my personal opinion, there's so little joy right now, with all the concerns going on in the greater world. So I think, while it may be a small achievement, it is an achievement, and I honestly do think that's important. Anyway, yeah, definitely check out The Last Son of Danu. I am dropping the story weekly on both Inkitt and on my Substack newsletter. On Tuesdays, usually around 11 o'clock. Right now, chapters 1, 2, and 3 are available to read, and soon there will be the next chapter coming out. Actually, by the time this drops, the next chapter will be out. So please check it out. Let me know if you like it. Leave a comment or a like or whatever you have, depending which service you're using to read it, because it does help push it up a little bit in the algorithm to get more exposure. And other than that, again, thank you so much for going down this journey with me, between the podcasting and releasing my novel. This is all a huge deal for me, and I do enjoy sharing it with all of you who are listening, even if it is only a few of you. Hey, that's more than one, so I think that's a win. So that's it. That does it for this particular episode of Tales of Erotasy. I hope you had some fun learning more about the inner workings of my Crimson world and the little taste of The Last Son of Danu, even though it's an extra part of it. And as always, thank you for joining me on this journey through lust, lore, and legend. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. It's the best way to keep the passion alive. Until next time, stay curious, stay daring, and keep dreaming of worlds beyond.